Tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation. I come from the University of Waikato, where it's my responsibility to try and stimulate the thinking and consideration of ideas, evidence, and their implications for young minds. And as my family would be quick to remind me, it's a bit of a cheat for you to go and talk to a group of productive people when one has spent decades working in universities, which don't exactly have a stellar record of being learning organisations themselves. For those of you who've been around the block a few times, you'll recognise that many of the things that I will have to say today are, we've heard of them before, right? We're repackaging some old ideas, but I suggest to you that some things we've done very well, but other things that we have neglected, and just because we've neglected some things doesn't mean that we should neglect them forever. So, title, Food, Culture, and Market Dynamics. Just to remember, the horticulture business is part of the food business. Let's never forget it. If it comes to culture, culture impacts consumption, so perhaps we need more engagement with anthropologists rather than traditional marketers. If it comes to addressing the challenges, perhaps we need a few more social workers rather than conventional business school alumni. Okay, the brief was to scratch a few scabs and identify some problems, some matters to address. But I say, let's never forget that we do have a platform to build on. Let's be positive about where we are. Let's be proud of the good things that have been accomplished. We're not in the situation that New Zealand was in when the UK ended the EEC in 1973. We're not in the situation that New Zealand was in at the end of the Great Depression. There are issues, but there's a foundation that we can work from. And so given that we have a foundation, this success gives us options. It gives us the potential to do some stuff, to make a difference, to move on to the next level, to keep progressing. But success doesn't give us immunity from existing problems. We do have to address the pressures that exist in our vegetable sector, in our flower sector. Input costs, are too high. Processing closures are real and cause changes in practice. There are risks everywhere. But we do have a platform to build on. We do have foundations. But it's one thing to have a balance sheet. It's another thing to have an effective balance sheet. It's easy to have a lazy balance sheet. It's one thing to make investments. It's another thing to be writing down investments because we haven't fulfilled the dream. It's great to have the India Free Trade Agreement and all the others, but as Wayne Brown often reminds us, politicians don't sell much that generates revenue for the nation. And it's great to have a horticultural action plan, and I commend those who've worked hard to make it a reality, but I suggest to you it's strong on the things that we're already strong on, and it leaves a lot which we still need to address. Culture. consumers use food to express their identity, to express their values, to have control of their lives, to pursue their health aspirations. It's not just counting calories or meeting some constraints, as some of us were possibly taught in primary school in the distant ages. And so the challenge is for us is to make fruit and vegetables easier to choose and harder to treat as anonymous commodities. But we can't do this if we have homogeneous horticulture. We have to have brands and identity which connect with diverse people in diverse spaces. And this whole idea of the digital world affects our culture and the way we operate and the way consumers operate. Gone are the days of paper reviews of local restaurants, right? It's a digital review, and we love the service, and we affirm it immediately, or we're dissatisfied and we express our dissatisfaction immediately. We need to engage in these cultural conversations. You may say, Frank, you're just tossing about some ideas. That's easy. I draw your attention to the fact that a team of us at Waikato University have been doing some work with some international colleagues and also some colleagues within New Zealand, looking at consumption choices by individuals. We've done things comparing consumer attitudes towards plant-based foods, cultured foods, insect-based foods, traditional pastoral products. We've done things in terms of different pathways by which people obtain food. But what I take out of all of that work is that perceptions matter. It doesn't matter so much what the nutritional facts are or some other scientific measure. Perceptions are critical. We need to engage with perceptions. And secondly, what blocks the consumption of new products or the adaptation of consumer choices is when we make it hard for consumers to consume. I want to put on the table an uncomfortable proposition. I suggest we're good at producing food, but we're not so good at rewarding the producer of high quality food in the right place at the right time. We have built a system that rewards scale, bargaining power, and throughput. Now, that's not all bad. I'd sooner have that than one that's controlled by Kremlinist bureaucrats who try and control everything that we do. But it doesn't mean that we've reached nirvana just because we've got some freedom that our friends in North Korea and some other parts of the world don't have. In our situations, growers are price takers, margins tend to move downstream. Efficiency is not enough. So I have 4 questions. How did we get here? Where does value leak? Why does price dominate? And what can change? Concerning value leakage, do we spend time thinking about where the value is being lost out of our system? The danger of price dominating is that efficiency is everything, efficiency narrowly defined, And I suggest to you that many of us have employees that we really love when there's a straightforward task to do, and they do it absolutely focused, and they deliver. But when there's a curved ball, when something's outside the square, they don't have the ability to handle it. I suggest to you, if we strictly focus on price, we lose our capability to satisfy our customers and everyone else in the value chain. So we have a system built for volume, reliability and low transaction costs. But now, with the digital world that we've just heard about before, we can do better than that. 30 years ago, when I was trying to understand what product was being sold where, for what price, it was practically an industrial espionage challenge. You had to get people to leak information to you, right? Now you can search online and get some AI help, and you can find an awful lot of stuff very quickly. So we know that we are squeezed. The 3 items on the top I suggest largely have under control. There are challenges, but you're working at it. But I suggest our connections with consumers are not as good as they could be or should be, or we really desire. And I suggest to you our marketing structures and channels have served us reasonably well, but there's lots of room for improvement. So let's remember, value is created at every step, but it's captured unevenly. Now, don't assume that I'm suddenly going to jump into a Marxian worldview that everyone should get the same. No, not at all. People complete different tasks. People contribute to value in different ways. There's different exposures to risk. But we want participants to be rewarded according to the contribution they make and the risks that they bear and other relevant factors. And I suggest to you, if we do that, and growers receive the value appropriate to their contribution, and others in the chain do likewise, we all have reason to be satisfied. We do well when all the members in the chain do well. Market power is an important issue. It's a nice aphrodisiac for politicians wanting to campaign. But let's remember that growers need intermediaries and growers need retailers. It's how we work together to achieve our goals. I'm a great fan of markets, but markets work on the back of collective action, of people working together. And the advent of the digital technologies that we've been hearing about today help us in that space so that we no longer have some of our old problems of price blending and profit pooling and other things which distort the incentives for those of us involved in the industry. Okay, if we just stay on the price treadmill, it's a race to the bottom. Price becomes the language, volume becomes the answer, margin becomes the casualty. The problem with commodities is they are markets without relationships. I value markets. I love markets with relationships even more. So in our current system, we optimize some things, but we still have too poor a visibility of margins in many spaces. We still have too much short-term price signalling. We still have underinvestment in shared value. So I suggest that if we're to make progress, resilience will come from strategic positioning and not just better growing. Keep up the better growing, but invest in reducing substitutability. Let's be clear about the USPs of our products. Let's collaborate in ways that facilitate rather than reverting to the lowest common denominator. Okay, we want to gain some momentum going in the right direction. We want strategic relationships I'm reminded of one of my old bosses. The board chair sitting around the table said to me, Frank, that's enough of the connections. I want to know if the current is flowing. And I suggest to you that some of our strategic relationships are pretty shallow. We want our collaboration to be inclusive, but in our inclusiveness, we don't want to destroy value messages. We often talk about differentiation, but can we sustain our differentiation? It's critical that we do. And if we pursue that journey, and if we adopt some new and evolved business models, the prospects of success are greater. Again, in terms of the contracting, there's a whole set of contracting opportunities that we can rethink, and digital technologies help us in that process. So, what can growers do in the next little while? What can the industry do in the next little while? I've come up with 6 ideas. We could refine them and improvement. But I suggest to you that the 3 in the top row you can largely do by yourselves in your own organisation, in your own orchard, in your own business. We can map our margins. Do we know the product, channels, and customer combinations which return the most to us? Do we measure dependency and how exposed we are to different channels for the delivery of our product? Are we constantly seeking new and better information about our customers, our products, and where they are? I suggest to you that many of us learn an awful lot in the first 3 years of our career. And some of us spend the next 30 years depreciating that capital. So some things we can do by ourselves, but I suggest other things we need to do in relationship with others. I suggest building options involves relationships. I suggest collaboration is important, but collaboration when it's just excess caffeine, beer or wine doesn't get us there. Not even sedate organisational meetings with boring, straightforward agendas. Yes, have order, but let's find ways to collaborate that empower and wrestle with the problems and challenges and navigate to new positions. And all the way, let us keep telling our commercial story. Let's translate provenance, quality, and trust into reasons to purchase and remain customers. If the only story our buyers hear is price, we shouldn't be surprised by the answers that we get. I've spent too much of my life trying to manage university academics, but I tell you, it is the same challenge there of telling the story of what we are doing and why we are doing it and where we are going. Just because some people have PhDs or publications doesn't mean that they observe and understand the basic realities of life. And I suggest I've seen just as much blindness in my work inside boardrooms and in advisory roles. As someone who played significant roles within the reform of the statutory marketing boards in the 1990s, I'm a fan of structural change in certain situations. But having said that, structural change is only worthwhile if it enhances value capture on an enduring basis. And I think the attention that we should be paying at the moment is not to what politicians can do for us, but what we can do ourselves within our own individual organisations and our, what I call our economic clubs where we work together. And I suggest to you that the rise of AI, the rise of new digital technologies gives us lots of opportunities to change the way these entities function going forward. Some have told me that the system needs to change. I ask you, what would give growers more options, clearer value signals, and a more appropriate share of returns? I think That is where we should focus our discussion this afternoon. Thank you.